I thought it would be like any other job, quiet, uneventful, maybe a little cleaning here and there, the usual. Well, I was wrong. You see, this hospital, this place is different. The air feels thick, almost like something's always watching you. You can feel it, like a presence in the corners of your eyes, just out of reach. It doesn't hit you at first, but after a while you start to notice it. It's subtle at first. At first you think it's just the building settling. Maybe it's the pipes or the old floors creaking, but then it starts to get under your skin. It's always there. You can't shake it. The feeling that someone or something is watching, waiting, and let me tell you, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just laugh it off, push it to the back of my mind. But here's the thing, it's not the creaks or the whispers that'll get to you. It's the rules, the ones they don't tell you about until it's too late. See, when I started here, I was handed a list of rules. Short, simple. I didn't think anything of them at first. I mean, what kind of rules does a janitor really need to follow, right? But that's the first mistake. These weren't just suggestions, they were orders. And trust me, the moment I broke one, that's when everything started to fall apart. They told me, don't go into certain rooms, don't talk to certain people, don't look at certain windows. It sounded like the ramblings of a paranoid mind, but I didn't question it. I should have. I should have known. Yeah, I thought it was ridiculous, but it didn't take long for me to realize those rules, they were the only thing standing between me and whatever that thing was. And once you break them, well, it's already too late. Let me give you some context about this hospital. It's old, not the kind of place you'd want to be alone in, especially after midnight. It's got that feeling, you know? The one where you can't shake the sense that something's watching you. But I can't even explain why it feels that way. The whole building is like, it's stuck in time. The walls have seen things. The floors have felt things. It's just got that vibe. It's got these long, dark hallways. They go on forever. Some floors are always empty, locked up like they've been abandoned. But sometimes when you walk past them, you hear it. Faint. Something moving. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's just the pipes. But it always feels like something that shouldn't be there. Something that's been here longer than anyone can remember. I don't know what it is, but I know it's here. It always has been. And the thing is, no one really talks about it. They just pretend like it's normal. I started working there about 6 months ago, the night shift. Most people left after their 9 to 5s. A lot of people wouldn't stay late. Hell, some of them were scared too. I don't blame them. But I needed the money, so I signed up. No big deal. I didn't think much about the hospital's reputation. It was just another place, right? A hospital. Just like any other. Or so I thought. First few nights it was, peaceful. Quiet. I thought it felt kind of comforting. I mean, it was just me in the halls, just me in the dust. The janitor's closet had everything I needed, and everything was calm. For a while, it almost felt like home, until the end of my first week. By then, I started noticing things, subtle things at first, like the flickering light in the hallway on the 3rd floor. Just one light, flickering like it was trying to send some kind of message, but I brushed it off. Buildings get old. Lights go out. It happens. There was also this cold draft on the 2nd floor. It was the middle of summer, but there was this one hallway and it always felt cold, like the air had been frozen in time. But I thought, maybe it was just the air conditioning, you know? Nothing strange, nothing to worry about. But that was before the first rule, the rule I had to follow. You see, I was given a list of rules on my first night. Nothing fancy, just a simple list from the head nurse. I was tired, just starting my shift, and I thought it was all standard stuff. You know, clean this room, scrub that floor, just the usual. But then, at the bottom of the list were 3 rules that stood out. Rules I thought were, well, I thought they were ridiculous at first. Rule number 1, never go into the old storage rooms on the 4th floor after midnight. Sounds harmless, right? I didn't even think about it at first. I figured it was just a part of hospital procedure. Some rooms are off limits. Whatever. Rule number 2, Don't look through the windows on the east side of the building, especially after hours. Now, I didn't know what was so special about these windows. They didn't look any different to me, but okay, fine, I can follow that, no problem. And then there was rule number 3. Never under any circumstance talk to the night staff in the basement, no matter what they say. Now, I thought these rules were pretty strange. I mean, who's going to stop me from walking around a hospital? It's just a building, right? And why all the secrecy about the basement and the windows? It didn't make sense. But I did what I was told for a while. And that's when I started hearing things. At first it was subtle. The soft thud of footsteps on the 4th floor, where the storage rooms were. The hallway lights flickered more often. And sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something in the windows on the east side. Just a shadow. Or maybe it was a trick of the light. I don't know. But then there was the basement. And I'll tell you something. I don't know what I thought I'd find down there, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. Not in the slightest. Some rules are meant to be followed, because if you don't, you might not make it out at all. The first rule they gave me? Simple. Don't look through the windows after midnight. I thought it was just some kind of superstition, some old wives' tale meant to keep me in line. You know, the usual stuff they tell you when you're new to a job. Don't go in the basement alone. Stay away from certain rooms. Don't go near the windows after dark. I laughed it off, to be honest. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? But then it happened. I was in one of the older wings that night. You know the kind. Quiet, abandoned rooms. The place where no one goes anymore. It's like a ghost section of the hospital. The air in those hallways feels different. There's no movement, no noise except for your own footsteps echoing off the walls. But that night, it wasn't just the silence that unnerved me. It was the tapping. At first, it was slow. Tap, tap, tap. Almost like it was coming from the pipes, or maybe from a wall. I couldn't place it, but it was there, echoing through the hallway. I thought it was nothing, just part of the old building settling. I even chuckled to myself. Probably the pipes, right? What else could it be? But as I kept walking, mopping the floor, I passed one of the windows. I glanced up, half expecting to see nothing but the reflection of the dull hallway lights. But I saw something, a shape, just beyond the glass. At first I thought it was a shadow, a trick of the light, but it wasn't. It was moving, slowly, like it was watching me, watching my every step. I froze, I don't know why. Maybe it was the feeling that came with it, the feeling that something was aware of me. The air turned cold in an instant. I could feel the weight of it, pressing down on me. My heart started beating faster, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The shape, whatever it was, moved. It wasn't just a shadow, it was alive. I could see it shifting, like it was trying to make itself known. I turned away, quickly. My feet were moving before my brain could process what I had seen. But the thing is, I could still feel it, that presence. I didn't have to look to know it was still there. And as I walked down the hall, I felt my eyes tug back toward the window, as if something was forcing me to look again. So I did. I glanced back, and just like that, it was gone. No trace, no shape, no shadow, like it had never been there at all. Now, I didn't know what to think. I stood there for a while, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. It's not like I had a history of seeing things. I'm not one of those people who jumps to conclusions, but that felt real. And that's when I realized something. The rule? It wasn't some superstition. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. Now, I don't know what that shape was. I can't tell you. I wish I could, but I can't. All I know is that I never broke that rule again. Not after that night. I didn't dare. And from that point on, every time I passed those windows, my heart would race a little faster. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something on the other side. Watching, waiting. Yeah, that's the thing about this place. You start to realize that the rules aren't there to keep you out of trouble. They're there to protect you. But who or what are they protecting you from? After that, every step felt heavier. Every shadow felt sharper. And I wasn't alone. I could feel it. just behind me. And I knew deep down that I wasn't just cleaning a hospital anymore. I was walking through something else, something older. Then came the second rule. Never enter room 402 after midnight. They never told me why. They didn't need to. The way they said it, there was no room for discussion, no space for curiosity. They just said it, like it was a given, and you obeyed it or else. At first, I thought it was just another one of those bizarre hospital rules. You know, the kind they give you to keep you in line. Don't go into this part of the building after hours. Don't touch this equipment. I thought they were being overprotective, maybe a little superstitious. But I learned fast that there was something much darker at play here. Something I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. One night I was cleaning the ICU. The air was thick. The quiet was almost suffocating. It was well past midnight, and the usual sounds of the hospital had died down. The place felt frozen in time, like the whole building was holding its breath. And that's when I heard it. A hum, soft at first, barely noticeable, like a broken fan or an old machine running somewhere far away. But as I stood there, mopping the floor, it grew louder, closer. It seemed to be coming from the direction of room 402. I should have turned away, gone back to my duties and ignored it, but I didn't. There was something pulling me in. I had to see what it was. So I made my way down the hall, past the empty rooms, past the flickering lights. And there it was, room 402. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to let the light inside spill out into the hallway. The flickering light made the shadows dance on the walls, but there was something more to it. Something wasn't right. As I approached the door, I felt my heart start to race. I knew I should have turned back. I knew it, but I was too curious, too tired to fight the temptation. I pushed the door open just a little more, and the moment I did, everything changed. The air. It went cold. It wasn't like a normal cold. It was a deep, biting cold that seemed to seep into your bones. I stepped inside, and it felt like the world around me stopped. The room was empty, furniture scattered around like it had been abandoned in the middle of use, as if time had just frozen in place. But that's when I saw it. Shadows. They moved where they shouldn't have been, floating, twisting in the air, like something was alive in that room. Something that didn't belong. I froze just watching. My body couldn't move. The shadows grew darker, thicker, like they were wrapping around me, pulling me in. I could feel them in the air, in my lungs, in my chest. It was suffocating. The door slammed shut behind me. It was as if the room didn't want me to leave. I tried to move, to get away, but the shadows, they held me there. I don't know how, but I fought against it. I fought with everything I had. My mind screamed at me to get out, but my body was frozen in place, stuck, unable to do anything but wait. Then somehow, I don't know if it was the sheer will to survive or some force beyond me, but the door opened. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it did. And without a second thought, I ran. I ran like I had never run before. Out of that room, down the hall, back into the safety of the well-lit spaces. But I knew, deep down, I would never be the same again. You see, after that night, I knew. I knew that room 402 wasn't just a room. It was a place where the normal rules of the world didn't apply. Time didn't pass the same way. People didn't move the same way. And whatever lived in that room, whatever hung there in the dark, it didn't want anyone to leave. It wanted to keep you there, trapped in that place, frozen in its grip. I never went near that room again. Never. Not after what happened. And I'll tell you this, if you're ever working here, don't make the mistake I did. Don't let your curiosity get the best of you, because there are some things you just can't unsee. Some doors you should never open, some rooms you should never step foot in. The third rule, never speak to the nurse in the basement. The stories about her were always whispered in hushed tones, like if they said her name too loudly, she might hear it. No one talked about her directly, but you could feel the tension in the air, especially around the newer staff. People knew enough not to ask questions. It was clear. The basement was off limits, for good reason. Most of the time, I never had to go down there, but when I did, I was always told the same thing. Keep your distance from the nurse. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she was just another nurse, right? Just another worker in the hospital. Maybe they had their quirks, but nothing out of the ordinary. But that night I found out why people were so afraid of her. I was in the basement, cleaning out one of the old storage rooms. The place is cold and dark, filled with boxes of old equipment and unused medical supplies. It's a maze down there, and it always feels like you're being watched. I hated it, honestly. The air is thick with dust, and it smells like mildew. But that night, I had no choice but to go down there. The place was silent, except for the occasional creak of old pipes and the buzz of faulty lights overhead. I didn't expect to see her at all. The basement was supposed to be empty. But there she was, standing in the shadows. It was so strange. She almost blended in with the walls. Her figure was so still, like she wasn't even breathing. At first, I thought it was just another janitor or a night shift worker, maybe someone who had gotten lost. But when I looked closer, I saw her face, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Her face was pale, too pale. It was the kind of pale you see in old photographs, where the people don't look quite real. She had dark, hollow eyes, and there was something about her that made my skin crawl. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in, didn't turn her head or move an inch. She just stood there, like she was waiting. I tried to speak to her, just to break the silence. I thought maybe she was just lost, or maybe she needed something. But when I opened my mouth, the words felt heavy. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the air around me thickened, like I was being suffocated by something unseen. "Are you okay?" I asked. I don't know why I asked, but it felt like the right thing to say. She turned her head, slowly, so slowly, it made my stomach drop. And then she smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't the smile of someone you'd expect to find working in a hospital, caring for people. No, this smile was dark. It was wrong. It was a warning. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice was like ice, sharp and cutting through the silence. And just like that, she disappeared. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone, like she had melted into the shadows themselves. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure if what I'd seen was real. But when I looked around, there was nothing. No trace of her, not a sound, not a movement. Just the emptiness of the basement. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. That was the night I learned why the basement was never a place to linger after midnight. There's something in that place. Something that doesn't want to be seen. Something that watches you, waits for you to break the rules. And if you do, if you're foolish enough to speak to her, you'll regret it. I learned the hard way that some people, some things, are best left alone, especially in the dark corners of a place like this. Don't go looking for answers. Don't speak to her. And above all, don't make the mistake of wandering into the basement after midnight. Finally, there's the last rule. Leave before dawn. This one I didn't understand at first. I thought it was just another of the hospital's strange rules, something to keep the night workers from staying too long. But I learned quickly that there's a reason for this one, a very real one, and that's what scares me the most. One night I was working late, cleaning the ICU. It was just before dawn, the sky outside still dark and heavy with that strange weight of the night before the first light broke through. You know that feeling? The air feels thick, like the pressure is rising, like the world is holding its breath. It wasn't my first time working this late, but tonight felt different. Something in the air had changed. I don't know if it was the quiet or the fact that the lights flickered occasionally, but it was unnerving. And then I heard the whispers again. But these weren't the usual quiet voices, the kind you can convince yourself are just the wind or old pipes. No, these were loud, sharp whispers, as if the building itself was talking, groaning under some heavy weight. They seemed to come from everywhere, above, below, all around me. I tried to ignore it. You learn to ignore strange sounds in a place like this, but it was impossible. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, and not in the way shadows normally do. It was like they were moving, pulling themselves into shapes, taking form, as if something unseen was slowly taking shape right in front of me. I could feel it. I could feel something watching me, creeping up from behind. It wasn't just the air that was heavy now. It was everything. The very space around me seemed charged with an oppressive force. I didn't look. I didn't want to look. But I couldn't help it. My body was frozen, like it was being pulled, almost against my will. I turned around slowly, and there, in the dim light of the ICU, I saw it. A figure, tall, shrouded in darkness. It stood perfectly still, almost like it was waiting for me to notice it. I couldn't see its face, just a black mass of shadow and something darker. Something wrong. And when it saw me, it didn't move. It just stood there, staring, unblinking, like it was studying me. That's when it hit me. That's when I realized what dawn really means here. Dawn isn't just a time of day, it's something much worse. It's when whatever this place is, this thing, is allowed to wake up, to stretch itself free from the shadows that bind it, and it feeds on fear. It needs you to be afraid. I didn't wait to find out more. I ran. I didn't care about the floors I missed cleaning or the mess I left behind. I didn't care about anything. I just had to get out. I didn't stop running until I was outside, out in the cool, open air. And I swear to you, I never broke that rule again. I never stayed past midnight again. Because the truth is, this place doesn't just come alive when the sun sets. It gets hungry right before dawn. And if you're still here when that happens, if you stay too long, it will find you.